More money is on the way for minimum wage earners, at least, with Prime Minister Chris Hipkins announcing a boost in the hourly wage come April. It was one of a number of changes announced by the government yesterday in the lead up to this October's election. Also on the list, the media merger between TVNZ and RNZ and new funding for flood-affected businesses. To discuss all of this and definitely more, I've added some notes. We welcome our political panel, National MP Simeon Brown and Labour MP Aruna Williams. Morena to you both. Thanks again for coming in. Hey, all right, so I know that you're going to say minimum wage, Aruna, this is what people need, but is it enough? Because we had Bernard Hickey on this morning and he pointed out that this is one of the lowest of the last 5 previous increases that Labour has made to the minimum wage.
I'm really excited about this minimum wage increases. I mean, you've seen a government demonstrating that it's here to deal with those issues that are bread and butter for people and that they're facing every week. Last week, you heard that medium income earners were getting increases through the tax cuts to fuel and half-price public transport. And this week, it's those minimum wage earners who are doing it the toughest right now, going up to $22.70 an hour from one.
But there's still, I just said to you, it's the lowest of the last 5 previous, which have all been twice the CPI.
When you look at the steps that Labour has taken since it came in 2017, that is a significant increase. We're up to 96% of the living wage, and you get there through those progressive increases, not the 40-cent increases that National have said that they would do.
Well, I'd say yesterday's announcement, a range of issues was more a spin up than a back down. I mean, this was meant to be the big back down from the government. They've just delayed a whole lot of things, and then they've put this minimum wage increase, which actually, again, it doesn't deal with the underlying issues that we're actually facing in New Zealand, which is inflation, which is out of control, cost of living crisis, and I'm sure families will find that helpful, but it doesn't take into account the actual pain this is also going to put on businesses and small businesses up and down our country.
There's a big argument, though, that it won't impact inflation to the extent that you're...
Well, the reality is for small businesses, mum and dad businesses out there, and I've got a lot of those in my electorate, who come to me and say, actually, we've got nothing left in the tank. This government has increased costs and regulations. It's put in place another public holiday, 5 extra sick days. This is just another cost which they're going to have to find, and they're going to have to pass that cost on to consumers. So the reality is, whilst it may be useful, this doesn't deal with the underlying factors. And one interesting fact, if you're on the minimum wage and you work for a 41st hour, you'll be so rich, according to this government, that you should be paying the 30 cents tax rate.
Listen, you still get more money out of it.
Well, the point is,
go into the higher tax bracket.
So we actually need tax reform, and there's other things which the government can do to get inflation under control, bring costs under control. That's what they should be focused on.
No, let's just talk about this inflation point, because it is a bit of a misdirection. Treasury are forecasting, MB are forecasting that a 0.1% increase in the wage portion of GDP because of this minimum wage increases, that's not significant. And further, the unemployment won't be affected by the minimum wage increase because of the way that other wages have grown in the sector. So, when we look at these changes and the effect that they'll have on the economy, this is only going to help those people who are having the most pain from cost of living increases.
Then how do you get businesses on side? Because this is a welfare issue being solved by businesses that have to pay more. They're complaining that it's on short term. They're complaining that it's a bigger hike than they'd budgeted for. Even if they could cope with it, they're not happy about the surprise element that they feel they're getting.
What businesses are telling me in Auckland is that they have increased wages around people because of the increasing pressure on wages. The proportion of people on the minimum wage has gone down, and that's showing us that wages are increasing with businesses being able to pay people more because their productivity is going up and because the demand for people is still there. Businesses will need to innovate. Some will need to change for the way that they do things, but that's where the government is there to support those businesses.
But that means productivity has to increase, which means higher unemployment because we pay fewer people.
Well, let's just be real. This is going to add extra cost to businesses. However we try and flavour it, it's going to add extra cost to businesses. There are other tools the government could be looking at to try to ease.
Like what?
Well, we've said we need to index tax threshold to make a difference. That's a very
complicated and expensive.
But the reality is, why should people on the minimum wage be now going into the 30 cents tax bracket? That doesn't seem fair.
And so we actually
need tax reform. We actually need to make long-term impacts rather than simply just burdening extra cost on business, which is simply what this government does at every single turn. So
when we talk about the burden on somebody, if we don't put up the minimum wage, that burden of an inflation, of a period where costs are going up will be borne by the people who can least afford it. People are making impossible choices between food and heating their homes or a pair of shoes.
Yep.
And that's just not something the government's prepared to do.
Sure. OK. I want to move on because there is also, it's still on the economy, but just quickly, can we touch on superannuation? Should the superannuation age go up?
There's been no discussion of that.
But do you think it should go up?
Yeah, look, I don't think that would be something that the government would consider.
It's costing $1 billion extra a year, though. How will Labor pay for that? It's more than all of the tax that all the businesses in New Zealand pay.
When you look at what is fair for people who are retiring, I think you've got to say that Māori Pacific earners need to access that superannuation at the current rate.
Yep.
And I think the government would be focused on how we make that fair for people.
How do you pay for it then?
Yeah, well, what National has said is we think that actually we should be, over time, increasing it to 67. And that should be something which is done in a progressive way, not in one hit, because actually it is becoming incredibly costly. But also we need to give people certainty so that they aren't missing out in terms of people who are at that nearing retirement. So it's a complex issue. But it certainly is one that we need to have a conversation about as a country. OK,
just quickly, Three Waters. We know that there are some changes, but I'm lost. What's the detail?
Yeah, I think the Prime Minister came out really strongly and said what we need to do here is look at some concrete options.
But what are those options?
Well,
we've all been asking for so long.
What's not an option is the status quo. That we know as a government we need to invest in our water infrastructure around our cities and our towns. We've seen in Auckland the effect of underinvestment in our infrastructure.
So is co-governance on the agenda or not on the agenda? I mean, this is what the public would like to know.
Those are things which are being worked out by the local government minister, Kieran McAnulty. We're considering what governance looks like, but the key thing we need to solve here is investment in those infrastructure assets which have been really uninvested in for now.
Well, I mean,
you've got to pay for water infrastructure somehow.
This is a spin up, not a back down from the government.
But you've got to pay for it.
All of the issues that they raised yesterday, they're not backing down. They're just simply kicking for touch, hoping New Zealanders won't notice.
So you can have the last word. Simeon, if you've got some plan, how would you pay for it?
There is a need for reform. The issue is around the funding. But this government has gone and created a massive bureaucracy, included co-governance, and they didn't take this stuff to the last election. So actually, they need to come up and be open with New Zealanders about what they're going to do. OK, we'll save it for next time. You better come up with a plan for how you'd pay for the water infrastructure. Thank you both for coming on this morning.